Okay, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn about how to go solar with confidence prior to the Net Metering 3 deadline in California. My name is Spencer Fields from EnergySage, and I'm excited to kick things off. We're right at the top of the hour. We still have people rolling in, but I think we can get started. Before we get too much into the meat of the presentation, I want to make sure that we cover the high-level summary first. So if you only remember one slide from today's webinar, make it this one. The first thing to know, and the reason why we're all having this discussion today, is that California passed a new solar policy during December that will drastically reduce your savings from going solar, meaning it will take longer for solar to pay for itself in California moving forward. The new solar policy will reduce your 20-year net savings from solar by 60% compared with today, meaning you'll miss out on $30,000 to $40,000 of solar savings over 20 years on a typical solar project. Pretty significant. Importantly, this change only impacts new solar installed by people who have PG&E, SCE, or SDG&E as their electric utility provider, and the change doesn't go into effect until mid-April. That means that there's still time to lock in higher solar savings before the mid-April cutoff, and it doesn't even require having to have your solar panels installed and connected to the grid by then. So it's definitely very doable to lock in higher savings rates, which is why this is a big part of what we're going to be talking about today. Here is a quick outline of where we're headed on the webinar, so you know what you can expect. First, a little bit about who we are at EnergySage and some quick intros to who you'll hear from on today's call. From there, we'll get into the specifics of California's solar policy changes. I don't want to spend too much time there, but I do want to make sure that we put these changes in context and that you understand the impact of these changes on solar savings. And then from there, we'll move into talking about how to get grandfathered into existing higher savings rates, and then transition to talk about how EnergySage can help make that happen. We'll be sure to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A, but please feel free to drop questions into the Q&A section of Zoom, which I see many of you are already doing, as they come up, and we'll try to answer them in real time or at the end of the call. So, who are we? In case you're unfamiliar with us at EnergySage, thank you for signing up for our webinar. But EnergySage is the country's largest renewable energy marketplace. So what that means is we provide educational resources and tools to people who are interested in learning about their clean energy options. And then when people are ready to move from researching to shopping, we provide an online platform for them to do just that. So we got our start with residential solar, which means we gather custom solar quotes for your home from pre-screened solar installers in your area. We moved from residential solar, solar for homes, into solar plus storage, so adding a battery for backup. We built a community solar marketplace, which I think is going to be very valuable and very useful in California moving forward. We have a non-residential side of our business. So if you own a business or a nonprofit and you want to go solar, we can help make that happen. And then most recently, we launched a heat pump marketplace, which is only live in a couple states so far. So keep your eyes and ears to the ground if you're interested in that in California soon. I really want to point out before we move on that EnergySage is a mission-driven company. So our goal is pretty clearly defined on this slide, but really we believe thoroughly in simplicity, transparency, and choice, and are committed to providing those three things to help people make smarter energy decisions. By way of quick introductions, today you'll hear from me, my colleagues Emily and Ben from our content team and from our energy advisor team. So they're the ones who are writing our educational resources in case you've seen any articles that we've published about Net Metering 3 or anything else, and also the ones who are on the phones helping you walk through the process of going solar, answering any questions that you have about the entire process. So let's get into it. Oh my word, we already have 17 questions. Okay. That is fantastic. That is the whole point of the webinar. So I'm glad that you're taking advantage of the Q&A section already. So what changed in California? What does it mean for you? At its core, the solar policy change in California is a change to the state's net metering policy. So it's worth a quick refresher on how net metering works. Net metering is the foundational policy that makes the economics of solar work. Basically, when your solar panels are producing more electricity than you're using in your home, you send any excess solar production back to the grid and run your meter in reverse. At times when you're consuming more electricity than your panels are producing, either on a cloudy day or at night, you'll pull electricity from the grid and your meter runs forwards. At the end, you're billed on the net difference of what you sent to the grid versus what you pulled from the grid, hence net metering. In California, the state is currently on its second net metering policy, which is regularly referred to as NEM 2, with NEM or NEM standing for net energy metering. Under the first iteration of this policy, when you sent extra solar to the grid, that energy was compensated at the same rate you paid your utility for electricity. So in other words, one-to-one net metering, because the value of selling your solar to the grid was the same as the value of purchasing electricity from the grid, one-to-one. Under the second current iteration of the policy in California, the rate you receive for sending solar to the grid is based on the time period when you export it. So it aligns with the price you'd pay to purchase electricity from your utility under a time of use rate plan, like we have here on the right for PG&E. Basically, that means that exporting electricity is more valuable during peak periods, generally 5 to 8 p.m. or 4 to 9 p.m., as you see on the right, than it is during the middle of the day when solar is abundant. Also, it's worth pointing out that last bullet on this slide that it's not quite one-to-one net metering because exports are reduced by a couple of cents for public benefit charges, which are called non-bypassable charges. Under the new solar policy in California, which is being referred to as NEM 3, the main difference is the rate at which you're compensated for the excess solar you send to the grid. That's the biggest difference here. It is no longer credited at retail prices. And in fact, it's no longer tied to the price you pay for electricity really at all. The rate is now based on an avoided cost calculator that models how valuable it is to not use electricity during a certain time period. The rate varies for every hour of the day, for every type of day of the year, so weekend versus weekday, and for every month of the year. So in other words, between 24 hours in the day, 2 different day types per week, and 12 months per year, multiply that all together, there are 576 different rates at which solar will now be compensated over the course of the year, all of which are preset and which are represented in those heat maps for an indicative, or for weekdays and weekends for an individual year on the right. So again, the main difference between the current net metering policy and the new net metering policy, NEM 3, is the difference in the rate at which solar exports are compensated. That's the main difference. By no longer attaching the rate that you can sell electricity at to the rate that it costs to purchase electricity, NEM 3 has a big impact on the overall economics of solar compared to the existing NEM 2 policy. Basically, you go from selling solar for over 20 cents per kilowatt hour on average to selling solar for about 4 cents per kilowatt hour on average, or 70 plus, maybe even an 80% decrease in the value of solar that you send to the grid. Over the course of 20 years, this means that your net savings from going solar will drop by 60%, meaning you'll miss out on $30,000 to $40,000 in savings from solar as compared to NEM 2. That's worth repeating. Over 20 years, the difference from installing standalone solar will be about $30,000 to $40,000 in savings, in bill savings, between net metering 2 and net metering 3. This also means that it will take several more years for solar to pay for itself. The policy is modeled around a 9-year payback period compared to a 5 to 6 year payback period today, and our own internal analysis makes it look like it's closer to a 10-year payback period. All of which is to say that NEM 3 is really designed to incentivize more people to install a battery, because the policy is saying, don't send electricity back to the grid, find a way to use it at your home, or to only send it to the grid when it's most valuable. So If you're looking for a silver lining, under NEM 3, you will see a faster payback period if you install solar with storage than if you install solar on its own. And in fact, you'll even see twice the savings from solar plus storage than you would from solar on its own. So that is a potential good story. Net metering 3 also, I think, is going to open up the community solar marketplace in California, which does help make solar more accessible and affordable to people who don't own their homes or who don't want to put solar on their own property. At the end of the day, though, and a big piece of what we're going to talk about today, it's worth reminding you that there's still time to take advantage of higher solar savings in California, and I will pass it off to my colleague Emily to cover exactly how to make that happen.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Walker, and like Spencer said, I'll be walking you through how you can lock in current net metering rates before they disappear. So first and foremost, in order to take advantage of net metering 2, you'll have to submit a complete interconnection application by April 14th at 5 p.m. Pacific. This is true whether you're installing solar for the first time or whether you're planning to increase the capacity of your existing system, which is a question that I was seeing pop up quite frequently. Your installer will be the one to actually physically submit this application, but you'll still need to be involved in the process, and the sooner you get started, the easier it'll be. Most importantly, you don't have to complete the installation by April 14th. You just have to submit the interconnection application. So what exactly is included in this application? A complete interconnection application that's free of major deficiencies will include the contract that you've signed with your installer, a single line diagram, or essentially a basic electrical mock-up of your system that your installer will create, a signed solar energy system disclosure, a signed California Solar Consumer Protection Guide, and if you're oversizing your solar system, a signed oversizing attestation. So the only thing on your to-do list is reviewing and signing this paperwork. The rest will be handled by your installer. Next slide. Importantly, there are still some changes that you can make to your system design after your application is submitted without compromising your net metering 2 status. You can first replace your roof, you can upgrade your electrical panel, you can add a solar battery, change your financing plan, decrease your system size by less than 20%, change the equipment included in your system as long as it doesn't impact the system size limits, and you can update your meter. But there are also changes that will cause you to lose your grandfathering into net metering 2. If you increase your system size, decrease your system size by more than 20%, change generators or change installers, unless it's a subcontractor under your original installer, you'll be switched to net metering 3. So as you can imagine, California installers are swamped with demand right now, which means it's more important than ever to start the solar process soon. So with that in mind, we interviewed California installers in our network to get a sense of the recommended timeline to ensure you're able to lock in net metering 2 rates. First off, by March 3rd, we recommend having your quotes in hand. For reference, on EnergySage, it typically takes about 1 or 2 days for you to receive quotes. By March 17th, you should choose an installer and sign your contract with that installer. This means you have about 2 weeks to compare your installer quotes based on factors like reputation, cost, and equipment. By March 31st, you should have scheduled and completed your site visit. During this step, an engineer will ensure your home is ready for your new solar energy system. These site visits can occur either virtually or in person. If your site visit is virtual, you probably have a little bit more wiggle room here, but just in case you didn't make any last minute changes, it's ultimately better for you to complete it sooner rather than later. And then as we previously mentioned, by April 14th at 5 p.m. Pacific, your installer will need to have submitted your complete interconnection application. Then you'll have 3 years after your application is submitted to get your system installed and interconnected. But the sooner it's up and running, the sooner you can start saving on your electric bills with your solar system. Next, I'll pass it over to Ben, who's one of our energy advisors, and he'll discuss how EnergySage can help you lock in these rates.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone who took time out of their day to join this webinar. So my name's Ben, I'm an energy advisor, and I'm here to discuss how EnergySage can help meet that deadline in a reasonable time frame. What we want to do is break things down into 5 steps. We don't want to overcomplicate things. So the first is to register for a free account within EnergySage. To Emily's point, you should receive quotes within a day or two of that account. Your second is to receive custom solar quotes from reputable installers within your area. You can get anywhere from 2 to 7 quotes. And then your next step is to help get support from unbiased, dedicated energy advisors. What we want to do is help answer questions, make sure that you feel confident in the installer of your choice. The last piece is to finally select your installer, sign that contract, get that site visit underway, get that interconnection agreement submitted, and then eventually your system up and running and fully producing power. So EnergySage is a great resource to not only go solar, but go solar when there is a time constraint such as this. It allows you to get quotes quickly in a simple, easy to access location where you can view them side by side. We have great content from our content creators, blog posts, articles that can help make that informed decision. But more importantly, you have your unbiased, dedicated energy advisors who are going to be here along this entire process. What you can expect is transparency in your solar quotes from pre-vetted local installers that you can ultimately feel confident in at the end of the day. So we talked about next steps, what that's really going to look like. You can sign up for EnergySage and start to receive quotes. You're going to receive those again in about 1 to 2 days. Once that happens, you are going to want to review them, compare them, make sure that the installer is your best fit. And that's exactly where myself and our energy advising team will come in. We just want to make sure that you are supported throughout this entire process because solar isn't easy in general. It's not going to be easier with a timeline like this as well. After that, you're going to take your steps to finalize your contract with your installer, and they will do the legwork to make sure that your interconnection agreement is submitted by April 14th. We are in communication with our installers every single day. They are ready to move forward and help you get there before that April deadline. And that's really it. Now we're going to open it up to questions, Q&As pretty much to help you along your way.
Thanks so much, Ben. Thanks so much, Emily. And thank you, everybody, for joining us so far. There are loads of questions in our Q&A already, close to 80 already, which is remarkable. So we're going to do our best to sort of work our way through each of these. I think some of them we'll be able to answer very quickly, and some will try to take a little bit longer period of time to get to. But I'll make sure to do my best to try to get through all of the ones that are in here. If you have your hand raised as an attendee and you have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A or send it to us directly in the chat. I'm actually not sure if you have that ability as an attendee of the webinar in Zoom, but I think the first thing that we see a lot of here is, can I increase my system size later? The current regulation is that if you increase your system by 10% or 1 kilowatt, sort of whatever is I think it's 10% up to 1 kilowatt, you can remain on your existing net metering system. That's not a very big difference. And the other thing about that is that when you make that increase in your system size, that doesn't mean that you get 20 more years on the existing net metering policy that you're on. Rather, your original interconnection day or permission to operate, the sort of the day when you actually flip the switch on your panels and they start providing energy to your house, that date remains the beginning of your 20-year period. So if you have a small system now and think that your usage is going to extend in the future, yeah, try to expand it earlier and get in before the deadline. If you have a very old system, one thing that you could do is, in fact, just take down that whole system and go through the whole process of putting an entirely brand new system on your roof and get that application in before the NEM 2 runs out in the middle of April. hopefully that answers those sorts of questions, and sort of we'll find more as we get through the rest of these questions here. Another one that we're seeing pretty regularly is what happens if I sell my house. If you have NEM 2 and you sell your house, the new owner of the house will still be on net metering. So if you get in before the deadline, there will be no change to the status of the home's solar compensation if you then sell the house 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's actually different under net metering 3. So under the new policy, if you wait until after mid-April to go solar, and get locked into the rates for 9 years, and then sell your house, the compensation for solar will actually change after that for the new owner of the house, which is kind of interesting. In terms of how much you can oversize a system now, if you're looking at your existing electricity usage and are saying, okay, I think in the next couple of years, I'm going to get an electric vehicle, heat pumps, an induction stove, whatever else you're going to do to electrify the rest of your life, you can sign what's called an oversizing attestation and include that in your interconnection application. And when you do that, you'll be able to then install a system that exceeds your current demand moving forward. That is true up until the transition deadline in mid-April. Under net metering 3, you'll only be allowed to sign an oversizing attestation for 150% of your existing load. So if you're getting an electric vehicle, you'll have to wait to actually see how much electricity you're using, charging that at home, to then be able to size a solar panel system appropriately for that. Couple of questions around what specific documents are required to actually make this happen. Emily, can you hop in with a review of the documents and what the utilities will tell you to indicate that the submission is complete and accurate enough?
Yeah, for sure. Let me just pull that up here.
Awesome. And while you're doing that, one other question that I see sort of towards the top here is, will you have access to this recorded webinar? Yes. I've seen a lot of questions asking for the slides after this. We can certainly include those in the post-webinar email that we'll send to all of you. Another one, will solar projects for LADWP be affected by this new rule, or will those still get full savings? There are no changes to LADWP's current net metering policies. That's also true for Sacramento Municipal Utility District. SMUD just recently changed their net metering policies, and from what we've heard, LADWP has no interest in actually changing their net metering policies, but there is the possibility that they follow what the CPUC says for the rest of the investor-owned utilities. But all right, back to you, Emily.
Yeah, I'm all set here. So a complete, like I said previously, a complete application will include a single line diagram, which will be completed by your installer. You don't have to worry about that. Your signed contract with your installer, and then you'll also need to sign a few other pieces of paperwork, including a solar energy system disclosure, a California Solar Consumer Protection Guide, and then if you are choosing to oversize your solar system, which means that it's going to be a bigger system than the electricity you consumed over the past year, you'll also have to sign an oversizing attestation. And then once the application has been submitted, your installer will receive a confirmation from your utility provider. And from what we've heard from CalSA or the California Solar and Storage Association, PG&E will send a confirmation that says sent for review, SCE will send one that says deemed valid, and SDG&E will send one that says pending AHJ.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. So there was a question that we had around, right, does it sort of what do the utilities have to explicitly sign off on from the application to show that you've qualified? Those are what you need to see in the emails from the utilities to say that your application has effectively been accepted. Question around how the new laws impact people who are leasing solar panels. If you have solar already, it does not impact you. So if you currently have a leased system through SolarCity or Tesla, for instance, like this question indicates, you're totally fine, nothing should change, excuse me, because those systems are grandfathered into the existing net metering systems. Moving forward, because the compensation rates for sending solar to the grid have been reduced, that means that leases probably won't be as economically viable. It'll be harder to design a lease that has the same sort of discount that they do today. That's my guess. Maybe that won't be the case though. A question around, does this affect batteries as well? So I think what net metering, so one thing with net metering too is that if you have solar panels now, and you want to install a battery, you do not have to do that before the deadline. You can install a battery at a later date and remain on net metering too. That's also the case if you want to submit a solar interconnection application now and then add a battery at some point down the road. But I do think that, sort of like we were talking about at the top of this webinar, I do believe that the net metering 3 policy will incentivize batteries because it will make less sense to install solar on its own, and rather economically it makes sense to install solar plus a battery after April 15th. Let's see here. Are free solar plus cash scams? Yes, absolutely. There are ways to pay for solar that allow you to purchase a system or pay for a system with no money down, with zero up front. And all it is it's sort of replacing your electricity bill for solar loan or lease payments. But there's really no such thing as free solar. That's a scam. How does the grandfathering work? What would stop California from canceling the grandfathering clause at a later date? That's a good question. It's written into the decision that was passed by the California Public Utilities Commission. And in fact, that was a change from earlier versions of the proposed change to net metering. So I think that that's unlikely for the state or the California Public Utilities Commission to remove the grandfathering clause. Let's see here. What is the timetable, the time to complete net metering 2 once you sign a contract? From the time that you submit the interconnection application, you have 3 years to actually have that system installed and operable. So, connected to the grid and receiving your permission to operate from the utility. Can a homeowner without taxable income that installs solar transfer the solar ITC investment tax credit to another private party that has taxable income? That's effectively what a lease or a power purchase agreement does, is that somebody like a Tesla will take the tax equity benefit of installing solar from you and provide you with a discounted cost on solar for being able to take that benefit. I will also say, under the Inflation Reduction Act, there are direct pay stipulations that should make it easier for people who don't have tax liability to take advantage of the investment tax credit and still go solar with a discount from the ITC. Net metering 3 pays, oh my word, I feel like we're answering all these questions and they're just more and more popping up. This is great. Net metering 3 pays higher rates for energy sold through battery installation. If you're going to buy a battery, is there a possibility that you would be better off under net metering 3? Potentially, yeah. I think the payback period is going to be pretty similar. I think the 20-year net savings are going to be higher under net metering 2 with a solar plus battery than it would be under net metering 3. So I still think it makes sense to get in the queue for solar plus storage now in advance of the transition. But there are going to be certain points in time, mostly in August and September, about 70 to 100 hours out of the year, where you could make a pretty decent amount of money by storing energy in your battery and then sending it to the grid, and that should pay for the battery pretty quickly. So if all you're looking for is no real, if you're willing to do that and to optimize your battery to be able to send electricity to the grid during those 70 to 100 hours out of the year, and then just have it on hand for backup the rest of the year, yeah, maybe it does make sense to wait until net metering 3. More about expansion, right? Maximum system size you can install, right? I think if you are trying to get in under net metering 2 and you are looking to oversize the system based on your existing load, I think it's going to be hard to do so. If you do it up to about 200% of your existing electrical usage, you might see fewer questions from the utility. Whereas if you try to go above that, then your application might be declined. And if your application is declined, then you're kind of out of luck for net metering 2. Interesting. New construction question here. It's worth finding an installer and working with them and seeing if it's possible to, I think you don't need to have a meter as of yet. They understand that all sort of, I think the utilities understand that all new construction is going to have solar on it anyways. So this shouldn't really impact that process too much, I don't think. Where do you get the paperwork to get started prior to the April deadline, and how much is the initial cost to get the process started prior to the deadline? That's a really good one. So most of the paperwork is going to be submitted by your installer. The entity that submits the paperwork needs to have the appropriate contractor licenses in California. So like Emily was outlining, really the main thing that you need to be able to do is get started getting quotes, and then select that installer and begin to move forward with them. Once you've signed a contract, everything really starts to happen. In terms of what the actual cost is going to be to go through that process, I think that it's going to be really down to the individual installer. We would imagine that installers will only ask for a deposit and not for the whole cost. So if you sign a contract with an installer and they're asking for all of the money up front, but aren't going to install the system for another couple of years, that sounds like a red flag to me. And I would push back on that and rather just look at a sort of a smaller upfront deposit, which I don't think should be more than like a couple $100 is my sense. Let's see here. One of the questions in here is, why did California do this? There's sort of mixed messages, but the main thing is to try to, as the state continues to expand the amount of solar that it has on the grid, that means that it's more valuable to have electricity at hours when the sun isn't shining. And so this policy is designed to incentivize more people to add a battery to their system to be able to sort of offset usage later in the day and send electricity to the grid. Let's see here. I see so many, I see so many of these that are coming in still now. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm actually going to, I think I'm going to actually go to the most recent ones and kind of go from there. Is oversize anything over 100%? Correct, over 100% of your existing electrical usage. If you need a new roof, you can begin the process without having to actually have the panels installed before 4/14. And in fact, you should be okay to go through the entire process knowing that you're going to replace your roof in the next 3 years as well before installing the solar. We're still working on understanding what sort of information about your new roof the utilities need to approve your interconnection application, but yes, you can do that. That's going to actually, I think, help people. Do customers usually have visibility of what document your installer will submit to SDG&E? Yes. And in fact, for most of these documents or many of these documents, you have to initial them or sort of indicate that you've actually seen them. Will adding a battery at a later date force you to change to net metering 3? No. For oversize, what is considered current usage? Yeah, average monthly over the last 12 months. You mentioned deposit cost should be a couple $100. If you select a small local installer, is it expected to pay in advance for the cost of the solar and battery supplies before they order them? It depends. That could be the case. Really, it's going to vary by installer, so it's worth asking that installer to see what their policy is. And once you receive a contract from them, that should lay out those sort of payment terms. Would we recommend electrifying first or getting solar panels and a battery first in terms of net metering 2, net metering 3? Ooh, that's a really good one. Gosh, I don't even know where to fall on that one. You know, we've done a lot of research and a lot of thinking around what sort of pathways to take towards electrification, and you know what steps, what order to adopt all of these products in. And it really comes down to personal preference. I think if you have a gas stove or oven and you are, you know, that's sort of the last entry point of natural gas into your home, then yeah, go for it. Move on to an electric range and oven first, and then see how much your usage changes, and then get solar after the fact. Sort of doing all of those things at the same time is often cost prohibitive. So it really sort of comes down to your priorities. If instead your priority is to reduce your electric spending right away, and you know that you're going to get an electric range top in the next year or two, then you should be able to oversize your system now and be prepared for that additional electric load moving forward. Let's see here. If you're planning on adding a battery, is there any sort of online calculator to see if you'd be better off under net metering 2 or net metering 3? There isn't yet, but we're trying to build one. We've done the analysis work. Now it's just a question of the product. So check in with us, and if you don't have, actually what I should do is I should go to the end here so that you have our emails. Send an email to solarteam@EnergySage or to Ben, and we can get you helped there. Can you submit an application with one installer and then change installers within 3 years? Our understanding is no. You should be able to have a subcontractor, because that's pretty standard practice for the solar industry in California, or really in the whole country. But if you sign it with one installer and they go out of business, I think you're probably out of luck. Do contractors know how to handle HOA requirements? Absolutely. But be sure to add that to your notes when you register for an account on EnergySage, and our installers will help you through that process. Is there a tax break if installing both a new roof in addition to solar? For commercial properties, yes, because the new roof can actually increase the output from the solar panels. But technically it doesn't work that way in solar. Is there a grid fee under net metering 3, or is it just a difference in the net metering? That is a really good question, Todd. You've been paying attention to the whole process in California. There used to be a grid access fee that was a part of the revised net metering policy in California. It was $1 per kilowatt charge monthly that was going to really adversely impact the economics of solar. But what ended up happening is that was removed. There is a monthly customer charge that I think is like $10 to $15 on the new electricity rates that you are required to go onto. There's one specific rate for residential customers in PG&E, one in SC&E, one in SDG&E, but that sort of monthly customer charge is not related to the fact that you have solar. In fact, one of the rates is an electric vehicle rate. They're generally electrification rates, and so they won't change based on how much solar you have. But that's an interesting question. So do you anticipate delays in installation once you go ahead and sign a contract? How busy will things get if you go ahead and purchase solar panels? Yes, I would anticipate a delay in installation. Work with the installers to figure out what that will be. Even at the end of last year, a lot of our installers in California were scheduling installations 6 to 12 months out, just given supply constraints, labor shortages, things like that. I think there just like straight up aren't enough electricians to install as many solar panel systems as are being purchased in California in a timely manner. So I would anticipate delays, but try to get some guarantees around the timing of that install. If PG&E denies the application, can you get out of the contract with the installer? You should be able to. If that's something that you're worried about, I would make sure that that is written into the contract explicitly. What are the permit and PG&E fees? I don't actually know the specific fees for each of the individual permits, but I've seen it before. I don't remember what it is, but I think it's reasonably low. I think there's a one-time fee, and it's, you know, not particularly expensive. What could the dollar per watt solar system expense be? That's a really good question. You can go to EnergySage, to our website. And if you're on EnergySage.com, you can go to our individual state data explorers. So if you go to our homepage and scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, you can click on California. There will be all the states that we operate in outlined at the bottom. And once you click over there, you'll be able to see the sort of real-time solar pricing in quotes on EnergySage. So that's a really good place to go to get a sense for what the cost per watt could be at the moment. And one thing to point out is prices could be inflated, you know, supply, demand, that whole thing. So make sure you shop around and get multiple quotes and comparison shop. Sun Power Company says they are the only company that makes solar panels in the USA. Is that so? No, in fact, Solar Panel doesn't even make their own solar panels anymore. They spun that part of their business out. If you want solar panels that are made in the US, there are a couple of different companies that do it. There's one called Mission Solar that's based in Texas. There's a company called Silfab Solar that has their manufacturing facilities, some in Canada, some in the US. Q Cells has a facility in Georgia. LG Solar used to have one in Huntsville, Alabama, that I think has been probably repurposed now that LG is no longer making solar panels. There's a company called Jinko Solar that has a production line outside Jacksonville. So there are a lot of made in America solar panels. And in fact, there's a company called First Solar that's based in Ohio, although their solar panels aren't really made for residential applications. I think if you're interested in American-made solar panels, there are a lot of companies that you can choose from, and you can indicate that when you get quotes from our installers on EnergySage. How incentivized are installers to submit all the proper paperwork before the installation is complete, or before the sort of transition period? That's a good question. I mean, they want to do it because they want to get the highest savings for their customers. And I think they also are going to recognize that if they don't get in before the application and the application isn't approved, then their contracts are going to be canceled. So they need to act with expediency and accuracy. Yes, you can always choose to move from net metering 2 onto net metering 3 if it seems like in the future with a solar plus storage system, you'll actually make more money from that. House has been in renovation for the last 2 years and kilowatt hours have not been representative of normal usage. Will utility accept looking at usage from 3 years ago? Probably, but I think you'll still have to sign an oversizing attestation. Tough to pinpoint the amount of our electrical bill because the rates went way up this month. Filling out the quote thing on our website. Awesome, thank you. Do your best and send us electric bills and we'll help. What kind of interest rates are being offered for solar loans? That is a great question. One of the really nice things about getting the application in before the deadline, mid-April, is that you don't have to have financing secured per se. That's something that you can do after the fact. Currently, loans have increased for many of the solar specific loan providers. They've had a couple of interest rate hikes over the course of 2022. You can still get pretty good ones where you buy down the cost of your the monthly cost and sort of the annual rate. But yeah, we'll you can check it out on EnergySage. We'll be publishing a report pretty soon that looks at how loan rates have changed recently, but we've definitely seen them go up in the last, call it 6 months. What is your recommendation in terms of finding the best solar installer in the market? What things to look for in a solar company? Ben, can I get you to answer that one? I've just sort of been going rapid fire here, but
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind just repeating that in full?
Sure
Just want to make
thing.
sure everyone heard that.
What is your recommendation in terms of finding the best solar installer in the market? What things to look for in a solar company?
Yeah, so every homeowner is going to be different. What I usually tell homeowners is, let's break it up into 3 categories. Who is installing the product? Let's look at their reputation, their experience, maybe their distance from your home. Second is, what are they installing? We can take a look at the warranty duration of the equipment, the overall quality there. And then the third is to just look at both of those categories under the guise of how competitively priced they are. And that is the best way to approach, the quotes there. And that's exactly where us energy advisors are going to come in.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Really well said. I live in Glendale, Water and Power. What net metering level do you have? You should be all set. This should not impact you. And whatever the net metering is, I don't know for all of the specific municipal utilities in California, but you should be good. Let's see here. Oh my word, there are so many questions still. Thank you all for sending them in. Robert, you're saying, why are you not answering my direct questions? Can you repeat them? I haven't seen them yet. I'm sorry. And if they're at the bottom, I will get to them. How does the interconnection application submission differ if you are planning to DIY your solar as a homeowner? That is a really good question that I don't have a good answer to. If you follow up with us, we'll try to run down an answer for you. Let's see here. What about, sorry, Robert, what about SoCal Edison policy? SoCal Edison is one of the investor-owned utilities, which means that they will be, if you are a customer of SoCal Edison, you're subjected to net metering 3, so you need to get in before the deadline if you want to get net metering 2. Once the documents package have been sent in by the deadline, do you know how long the review periods are? If you go past the deadline and don't have an acceptance from SDG&E, what happens? That's a good question. I think there's going to be a lot of demand. So if you were planning on going solar, try to do it sooner rather than later, recognizing how long it could take for those applications to actually be reviewed and accepted. Really, the primary thing that the utilities are looking for is substantial completion of the application. And so long as there are no major deficiencies, I think that's really what they're looking for prior to the deadline. So, and then they can sort of review the rest of it afterwards. If your solar company is bought by another company before build out, could you lose NEM too? I don't think so. Investment tax credit, you've been told 22% 2023 and lower in 2024. That was prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, which passed Congress in August of 2022, which bumps the investment tax credit back up to 30% and extended it through 2032. Does the cost savings of 60% under net metering 3 include the battery cost? The 60% reduction in savings is if you don't have a battery. If you include a battery, the reduction in savings is going to be lower, more like 10 to 30% from what it would be under NEM 2. And that does include the cost of the battery. We've included that in our modeling. Let's see here. General recommendation on local installers versus national installers, all else being equal in the quote. That's another good one for you, Ben, if I can get you while I run through some of these. The question is general recommendation on local installers versus national installers, all else being equal in the quote.
Yeah. So we hear that question a lot. There's a lot of great national installers. Some of them are a part of our platform. But when it comes down to it, the most important thing at this point is simply timeline. Local installers might be a little bit more keen to the local policies, local permitting, things like that. They also might just have more availability than these national companies. I think that is a great question for the installer specifically. I think both should be able to get you in as long as you move with some sense of urgency before that deadline.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Do all tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act require American-made solar panels and components? Not for residential systems, but for commercial systems, you have to have a certain domestic manufactured component. Let's see here. Is there a valid and robust method for doing a virtual site visit? Absolutely. And in fact, it's worth asking installers if they can do that. If they can do a virtual site visit, the process of signing a contract, getting the site visit, and moving forward with submitting your completed application can actually be pretty compacted as a result of that. They should be able to schedule it a day or two out. The remote site visit doesn't take that long. And then the paperwork itself may only take 15 minutes to actually complete. What is the benefit from a dollar perspective to get solar before April? If you get solar before April, it should be, for a typical system in California, you should be saving $30,000 to $40,000 more by getting in before the deadline than you would after the deadline for a solar alone system. Are building permits required to install panels? Yes, although I believe it varies based on the jurisdiction. Let's see here. Are there consultants available that can help an individual homeowner submit all of the applications? Potentially. Usually it's the installer who's doing all of that work. There are some organizations that help installers do that work. There's one in particular called Planet Plan Sets that's based in California that I might check out. And the owner of that organization is very heavily involved in the Solar and Storage Trade Association in California. So a really great resource. That's probably where I would start. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to one of our energy advisors and go from there. Let's see here. I'm going to do my best to try to get to a couple more of these. Do I get the 30% credit direct from installer, or it has to be applied through your taxes? It comes through your taxes. So if you install solar right now, you would get a 30% credit, or a value for 30% of, sorry, you would get a credit for 30% of the value of the upfront cost of the system off of your taxes when you file them for this year. So for instance, if you installed in 2022 and you're in the process and you installed a $20,000 system and you're in the process of doing your taxes now, you would get a $6,000 credit, not deduction, but credit off the cost of solar. How many panels is a typical system? That's a really great question. We see in California, I think the average system size usually is smaller than in the rest of the country. Historically, it's been sort of started at 4 kilowatts and moved up to 6. I think it's probably around 7 kilowatts last year. A 7 kilowatt system is probably about 20 solar panels, to give you a sense. And each solar panel is about the size of they're nearly, I think they're like 3 or 4 by 6. So they're about the size of a hockey goal, if that probably means more to me in the Northeast than it does elsewhere in the country. NEM 3 should not affect existing PPA agreements, but it would impact future PPA agreements. Does NEM 3 apply to customers of Orange County Power Authority? If that's a community choice aggregator and ultimately your electricity is provided by like SoCal Edison, then yes, you would still be impacted. But if that's a municipal utility, then no, you wouldn't be. What are the benefits of net metering 3? Yes, getting a battery will allow you to see a higher return on net metering 3. And the policy is designed to incentivize more people to adopt storage to help the grid. One company wanted you to give them $1,000 before doing a site visit. Is that a scam? That is a surprise, and I probably personally would not do that. I would look for another company. Is the installer the same as the contractor who's actually installing the system, or is the installer just the seller of the system? It can be just the seller of the system. They can subcontract the work itself. Can I pay for the residential system with a business account? If you run a business out of your home, potentially. Thank you all for joining this. The tax credit applies to the entire solar panel installation and a battery, but not a new roof, and I don't think it would include a generator. Oh, this is a good, probably sort of a good one to maybe get close to ending on, because I know that we're over the time that we already suggested, and we can try to answer the rest of these questions via email or after the fact, or if you have questions, you can reach out to us. But Ben, I got one more with you that we can sort of end on. Who can help us decide direct purchase versus power purchase agreement?
Yeah, that would ultimately be, of course, yourself, but absolutely energy advisors. We're here to give the pros and cons of outright ownership of a system versus a power purchase agreement or potentially a lease.
Perfect. And can you explain a power purchase agreement really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So a power purchase agreement, you are not going to outright own those panels, nor will you be able to get any of the tax incentives there. What happens is you will actually just pay a discounted rate for the power that the panels are producing. So much less savings overall than if you were to outright own that system, whether that be a cash purchase or a loan.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Emily, Ben, any sort of final thoughts about this webinar? I do want to be cognizant of the fact that we're coming up on the end of the hour, and we can sort of go from there. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at any of these email addresses. We'll send a follow-up email tomorrow that you can feel free to respond to. It'll also have a call scheduling link if you'd like to schedule time to talk with Ben about your specific solar project. Yeah, Ben, Emily, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just some final thoughts. You had all seen the timeline that was there, but I do want you to know, as more and more people, kind of find themselves in a similar boat as yourselves, that could be slightly longer. So we do want to say, if you are interested in solar, if you want to see what's out there for options, at least sign up and receive quotes as soon as you can, and then have your conversations with either installers or energy advisors. They're going to be there to make sure that you are ready to make the informed decision of if it's right or not for you.
Very well said, Ben. Emily, last word.
If you know anybody else in your family, your friends who are thinking about going solar, definitely spread the word that now is the time. You don't want them to miss out on savings. So be an advocate for solar in your community if you can.
Absolutely. Very well said. Well, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time today. We really, really appreciate it. Tons of really great questions, really wonderful engagement. We tried our best to answer as many as we could in the time that we had. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll send all of these resources around after the fact. And best of luck. Let us know how we can help you go solar before the mid-April deadline. Thanks so much.